Decoded.
Welcome back to Book Decoded. This time we're diving into Ethan Kross's shift. Managing your emotions so they don't manage you.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's all about, those times when you just feel like your emotions are getting the best of you?
Totally, like you're on a runaway train.
Exactly. And in Kross, he's like this mind mechanic who gives you the tools to kind of, take back control.
It's so refreshing because he actually backs it all up with science. It's not just like some fluffy self-help stuff.
Right. He's really digging into the neuroscience of emotions and how our brains work.
Yeah, and one of the things I found fascinating is how he talks about emotions being this double-edged sword.
Right.
Like, we need them. They're essential for survival, but...
They can totally sabotage us, too.
Exactly. And what's interesting? He doesn't buy into that whole good vibes only thing either. He actually says that even those quote-unquote bad emotions, they serve a purpose. They're giving us valuable information. They're signals.
So it's not about, suppressing them or pretending they don't exist.
Not at all. It's more about understanding them and learning to manage them effectively.
So we're not aiming to become, emotionless robots.
No way. I like how he puts it. It's about becoming the conductor of your emotional orchestra.
I like that analogy.
You get to shape the music, not just, get blasted by the noise.
That's a great way to put it. So how do we actually do this?
Yeah.
How do we become those conductors? Kross talks about these shifters, right?
Yes. These are tools, techniques, strategies for managing our emotions.
Like different lenses you can use?
Exactly. And one of the first ones he talks about is sensory shifters.
Okay.
And it's all about engaging your senses to shift your state of mind.
Makes sense.
Think about how music can totally change your mood, or how certain smells can evoke strong memories.
Oh, absolutely. I find baking does that for me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Though my sourdough starter can be more of a demanding pet than a stress reliever some days.
Uh-huh. Well, Kross talks about this chef Chase who finds so much peace in the ritual of baking sourdough.
Really?
It's about that mindful engagement of the senses.
Interesting. And Kross also mentions how listening to Journey helped his own daughter when she was feeling down.
Yeah, it's about finding what works for you.
Right.
And sensory shifters are great because they can work quickly, even when you're super stressed.
Like an emotional first aid kit.
Exactly.
So besides, blasting Journey or whipping up a batch of sourdough, what are some other shifters we can try?
Well, there's attention shifters,
Okay.
which are all about choosing where you focus your attention.
So being more intentional about what we're allowing into our minds.
Precisely. And this is where Kross introduces this fascinating concept called distanced self-talk.
Distanced self-talk. I've never heard of that.
It's basically talking to yourself in the third person.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it sounds kind of weird, but...
Like you're narrating your own life.
Exactly. And studies show that this simple shift in language can actually help you create some distance from the emotion.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And does it really work?
Apparently it does. It helps you see things more objectively. Like you're observing the situation from a calmer, more detached perspective.
Interesting. So it's like stepping outside of yourself for a moment.
Exactly. And it's so interesting because Kross contrasts this with how his grandmother, a Holocaust survivor, coped with her traumatic memories.
Oh, wow.
She didn't try to suppress them or avoid them completely.
So she didn't use distanced self-talk.
No, she took a different approach. She chose to engage with her memories, but at specific times and in specific ways.
So she had control over when and how she processed those difficult emotions.
Exactly. It's like she was consciously choosing when to open that door to the past.
That's a really powerful example. It makes you think about whether avoidance is always a bad thing.
That's a great point, because Kross actually addresses that head on. He says that chronic avoidance can be harmful because it prevents us from processing and learning from our experiences.
Makes sense.
But strategic avoidance can actually be useful.
Like how?
Like when you need to temporarily step back from a situation to calm down and regroup.
Okay, so it's not about being in denial, but about knowing when to take a breath.
Exactly. Like a strategic retreat, not a total surrender.
So it's about having that flexibility with our attention.
Yes. And that flexibility is a sign of resilience.
So we've got sensory shifters, we've got attention shifters.
Mm-hmm.
What other tools are in this emotional toolkit?
Well, next up we have perspective shifters.
Ooh, intriguing. What are those all about?
It's all about changing how we view a situation to change how we feel about it.
Okay, so like mind over matter kind of stuff.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
Kross tells this incredible story about astronaut Jerry Linenger.
The one who was on the Mir space station.
Yes. And he had to stay calm during a fire.
Oh my gosh, talk about pressure.
I know, right? But instead of panicking, he shifted his perspective from fear to problem solving.
So he focused on what he could control.
Exactly. Instead of dwelling on the danger, he focused on the tasks he needed to do to survive.
Wow, that's some serious mental strength.
It's a powerful example of how our perspective shapes our reality.
And Kross also talks about Vic Stretcher, who lost his daughter.
Yes, that was such a heartbreaking story.
He was consumed by grief, but then something shifted for him, right?
Yeah, he went on this kayaking trip, and it helped him see that he was missing out on the beauty that was still present in his life.
So he was able to reframe his experience.
It was a painful process,
Yeah.
but that shift in perspective allowed him to begin healing.
It's amazing how even in the darkest moments, we have the power to choose how we frame our experiences.
It's true. And, it seems like a lot of what Kross is talking about is about taking control.
Yeah, like not letting our emotions just run the show.
Exactly. And that brings us to social shifters.
Social shifters. So this is about how other people affect our emotions.
It's about how our social environments influence our emotions.
So like if I'm hanging out with negative people,
It's going to rub off on you.
that makes sense. Kross even did that experiment with the MBA students.
The one where they had to walk in each other's footsteps.
Yeah. What was that all about?
He was demonstrating how emotions can spread like a social contagion.
Wait, seriously? Just from walking like someone else?
It sounds crazy, but the students actually reported feeling more connected and even started experiencing similar emotions.
That's wild.
Yeah.
But it also makes sense. I mean, we all know how it feels to be around someone who's super upbeat.
And it lifts your mood.
Exactly. So it works both ways.
And that's why Kross talks about the importance of creating supportive social environments.
Like surrounding yourself with people who lift you up.
Yes. He even talks about how support groups like Alcoholics Anonymous create a culture that helps people stay sober.
It's about finding and creating those spaces that nurture our emotional well-being.
Exactly. And it's not just about avoiding negative people.
Right.
It's about actively seeking out those positive connections.
So choose your friends wisely.
And what's interesting? Kross also talks about how comparison isn't always a bad thing.
Wait, really? I thought we were always told to avoid comparing ourselves to others.
Well, he makes this distinction between upward comparison and downward comparison.
Okay.
Downward comparison is when you compare yourself to people who are worse off.
And that can make you feel superior.
Right, which can be a temporary ego boost, but it's not really helpful in the long run.
But upward comparison.
That's when you compare yourself to people who are doing better than you.
And that can be motivating.
Exactly, as long as you're not doing it from a place of envy or insecurity.
So it's about finding inspiration, not feeling inadequate.
Exactly. Kross argues that upward comparison can actually push us to grow and improve.
So it's about using comparison as fuel for growth, not a weapon of self-criticism.
And another thing Kross highlights is the power of giving to others.
Helping others.
Research actually shows that acts of kindness and generosity boost our own happiness.
So it's not selfish to focus on our own well-being.
Not at all. By helping others, we actually help ourselves in the process.
Like this ripple effect of positivity.
And that brings us to what might be the most influential shifter of them all: culture.
Culture. How does that play into our emotions?
Well, Kross defines culture as the shared beliefs, norms, and practices that shape our emotional lives.
Okay.
It's the water we swim in, so to speak.
I like that. And how does that affect us emotionally?
Well, he uses some fascinating examples to illustrate this. He talks about how he grew up with this message to fight back when confronted with aggression.
Stand up for yourself?
Exactly. But then he contrasts this with the Utku culture.
Who are the Utku?
They're an Inuit people, and their culture prioritizes harmony and avoids conflict at all costs.
Wow. So their whole approach to anger is completely different.
Exactly. It shows how much our emotional responses are shaped by our social context.
That's really interesting. It makes you realize how much our cultural backgrounds influence our emotional habits.
It's true, and Kross challenges us to analyze the cultures we're part of, to understand how they're impacting our emotional lives.
So like, are they supporting our emotional well-being or are they undermining it?
And he points to Alcoholics Anonymous as an example of a positive culture.
Because it supports sobriety.
Right. And he also talks about Pippa Grange, the psychologist who worked with the England football team.
Oh, yeah. They had that reputation for choking under pressure. What did she do?
She helped them create a culture of trust and open communication.
So instead of bottling up their anxieties, they could talk about them and support each other.
And it actually led to their most successful World Cup run in decades.
So he's saying that even deeply ingrained cultural patterns can be shifted.
Exactly. He argues that we can consciously choose cultures that support our emotional well-being.
That's so empowering. It's like we have more agency over our emotional lives than we realize.
I completely agree. We're not just passive products of our environments. We can be active architects of our own emotional well-being.
That's a great way to put it. So we've got all these amazing shifters in our toolkit. But how do we actually use them when our emotions are running high?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like having a fancy gym membership but never actually going.
But don't worry, Kross has got us covered.
Oh, good, because I need some help with that.
He introduces this awesome tool called the WOOP method.
WOOP. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this WOOP.
It stands for Wish, Outcome, Obstacle Plan.
So it's like a mental game plan for our emotions.
Exactly. And it helps us bridge the gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it.
Okay, I'm listening.
The first, you identify your wish, what you want to achieve.
So like, I wish I could stay calm during presentations.
Then you visualize the outcome, how you'll feel when you succeed.
So imagine yourself feeling confident and delivering that presentation with ease.
Yes. So you're tapping into that positive motivation.
Okay, but then what?
Then comes the crucial part, acknowledging the obstacles.
The things that could trip us up.
And here's the key. No sugarcoating allowed.
So we have to face our inner critics and those external challenges head on.
It's not always fun, but it's necessary.
Because it's realistic.
And finally, you create a plan for overcoming those obstacles.
So it's like anticipating those emotional potholes and having a detour ready.
Precisely. And this is something that SEAL teams do all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're masters of planning for contingencies.
So they're basically whooping all the time.
In a way, yes. They know that things can go wrong, so they have backup plans.
It's like that raid where the house was made of glass and the door shattered.
They had to adapt on the fly.
Talk about thinking on your feet. But that's the point, right? Life throws curveballs, so it's not about avoiding challenges, but about having the mental agility to navigate.
And one thing Kross emphasizes throughout the book is that there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
So what works for one person might not work for another.
Building your emotional toolkit is a personal journey.
And it takes experimentation.
Absolutely. So be patient with yourself and keep exploring.
So it's about finding what works for you, mixing and matching those shifters, and practicing those mental moves.
The obstacle.
The thing that's standing in our way.
Exactly. And this is where a lot of people get tripped up because it's not always comfortable to face those obstacles.
Yeah, we'd rather just pretend they don't exist.
I know, right? But Kross emphasizes that we need to acknowledge those obstacles head on.
So to all our listeners out there, we highly recommend checking out Shift, managing your emotions so that they don't manage you.
It's a game changer.
It really is.
Yeah.
And until next time, keep those shifters shifting, and remember, you have more power over your emotions than you think.
We'll see you next time.